In this slideshow, I'd like to compare ex ante and ex post rules and look at some of the problems with each. Ex ante, as I hope you remember from class, is to punish a risky behavior before there is an accident. So a fine for playing with matches, for instance. Ex post, on the other hand, is to punish after there's an accident and to punish for the damages. So not to punish people for playing with matches, but to punish people once there is a fire. Now, in a perfect world, ex ante and ex post rules will provide identical incentives, and either can work as long as the size of the punishment is appropriate. Either can work to provide the correct incentives. But that's in the perfect world. In the real world, problems can make either type of rule fail. And that's what I'd really like to focus on today. So let me start with the problem of unobservable behavior, or sometimes known as private information. So there is some dangerous behavior that cannot be seen by an outside observer. So a police officer could see if a driver was speeding, but they're not going to be able to see if a driver is sleepy. Friedman's absent-mindedness, where he's thinking about economics and thinking about theory while he should be paying attention to driving, again, is going to be invisible to an outside observer. And the problem here is if you can't observe it, then we can't punish that risky behavior before something bad happens. So that means that the ex ante rules won't constrain dangerous behavior. Ex ante rules won't work when the behavior is unobservable. Now, ex post may be able to work as long as the actor, the person with the information, as long as the sleepy driver or the absent-minded driver, as long as they realize that they're sleepy and they know that they could have punishment once an accident happens. But that really brings us to our second problem, and that is the problem of imperfect knowledge. In order for ex post to work, people need to know the probability of getting in an accident, given the behavior they're engaged in. They need to know the cost of the damages, and they need to be able to correctly calculate the expected costs. And so if people have the wrong probabilities, or they're putting the wrong values on the damages, or they simply aren't able to do those calculations well, then ex post won't work. And empirically, people are very poor at understanding small probabilities. And so, 1 in 100 is very different than 1 in 1,000, which is very different than 1 in 1,000,000. But often, working with those small probabilities, people don't make good decisions. So imperfect knowledge makes ex post rules ineffective or less effective than they should be. Another problem that affects ex post rules, again, this is a punishment after the big damage has happened, is that some people who are engaged in a risky behavior will be unable to pay. Now, the size of the potential loss can be really large here. Oil spills have run into the billions of dollars. A dorm fire could be hundreds of millions of dollars. And so because in the real world people are constrained by their income and wealth, and that means that some people aren't going to be able to pay for the damages they cause. Now, if the responsible party can't afford to pay the full damages, then ex post punishment will not be effective. Right? And if they know they're not going to have to pay because they're unable to pay, they're going to take on too much risk, too much dangerous behavior, because the ex post won't be fully implemented. And so in that case, ex ante would be better. Another problem with the large cost of damages is that the big ex post fines, right, may make some risk-averse people afraid to operate even when the benefits of the activity exceed the expected cost. Right, and so an ex post rule where they might have to pay millions of dollars might make them not engage in the activity even when there is a net benefit to society. So while most of the problems we've been looking at here have been ones that cause too much risk, too much dangerous behavior, it is also possible that we take too little risk, that we don't engage in enough beneficial activity. So these two problems about inability to pay and people who are risk averse being afraid of those large punishments can be helped by insurance. Essentially, insurance can convert an upfront, convert an ex post punishment into an ex ante punishment. Right? So rather than having to pay a multi-million-dollar settlement after an accident, we would pay the insurance company smaller amounts when we engage in the risky behavior. And then if there is an accident, the insurance company will pay. And so insurance, while it has other benefits to society, one of them is it can solve a couple of these problems with ex post punishment by making them into ex ante payments. A final problem I'd like to mention is around monitoring and enforcement. So even observable behavior is not always caught every single time people engage in it. And so that makes it easier for people to engage in risky or dangerous behavior. And sometimes people escape penalty even after there are big damages. And again, that would make an ex post punishment not as effective. We will talk a little bit towards the very end of the quarter looking at crime and punishment and probabilities. So, in the real world, problems exist that make both ex ante and ex post rules imperfect. Neither will always work the way we would like them to. Neither will always give us the right incentives. It is possible that sometimes a combination may work better, right, where there are some costs for engaging in the risky behavior, ex ante, and some cost if damages occur. But again, the dollar amounts need to be weighed carefully, and there isn't a simple general rule. This has been Chuck Stull from Kalamazoo College. Thanks for listening.